And then the last and final thing today is just a quick focus. A lot of the growers on the line here today are high yield growers, really trying to shoot for those top yields, 250 plus bushels per acre on the corn side of things. And in my experience, I have often seen that soil fertility can be the yield limiting factor in a lot of these situations. And it's not so much the NP or K, that macronutrient fertility, but it's some of the micronutrients that we might be missing out on. We pulled some pretty big yields off of our fields over the past 5 years, really since 2012 in the drought year. And have we replaced those micronutrients or for some of the leachable micronutrients, are they still in our soils? So some of the things we've been doing the past few weeks is getting out in the field, pulling some cores and getting a complete soil test ran. Often this can be done for somewhere around $25 a sample. And that's going to give us our total view of the soil fertility in the field. So this was a high yield grower in our Power 300-100 group who wanted to figure out which of his farms to plant his contest entry on this year. And all three of these fields were Tama silt loam soils, some of the better soils in the state of Wisconsin, very well drained, naturally high fertility. And we can see that the one I highlighted in green there, that was right near his cattle barns on his home farm, some acres he owned. The other two were rented farms. And we can just see that although farms, they might be exactly the same soil type, we can vary drastically in the overall level of fertility. So on that top farm, we only had 15 parts per million P1 phosphorus. Potassium, we were only at 94 parts per million, and we can see that only led to a base saturation of 1.9%. We ultimately did select this third field here, where we had over 100 parts per million of phosphorus. We had some really nice potassium levels at over 325 parts per million, and that led to a really nice base saturation of 5.8%. Base saturation of potassium. A lot of the high yield growers, David Hula, Randy Dowdy, like that number to be in that 6 to 8% range. So we're doing really good in this field on our macronutrient fertility, but we'll take a look at the bottom part of this test, which is what a lot of just the standard $8 or $10 soil samples don't include. So if we pay the extra few dollars, we can get a little bit of additional insight on things like sulfur, zinc, manganese, iron, copper, and boron. So on this grower's farm, we identified two big things that he was lacking. The first one was sulfur, and that was low across all the fields we tested for him. And then also boron was another one that we identified in that low to medium range. We can see the other micros he's doing pretty good on, but it kind of makes sense. Both sulfur in the sulfate form and boron are pretty leachable, just like nitrate. So it's makes sense that we're not able to build these levels up over time and have to go to more a supplemental annual type program like that. So went forward with the recommendation to apply a little more sulfur and boron to this field this year. Just some of the things we can do to say if we're stuck at that yield ceiling in that 240, 250 bushel range, how do we push those extra 10 or 20 bushels out? And a lot of times it comes back to that micronutrient fertility. So in summary, once we've determined what those nutrients are that are yield limiting off of a soil test, we need to find efficient and effective sources to apply. So in the example of sulfur there, certain sulfur sources aren't immediately available to the plant, things like elemental sulfur. But in this case, we want to apply something that's really sulfate ready for that plant to uptake and use. And whether that could be ammonium sulfate, dry, applicated over the top of a growing crop like this, that's one solution. Ammonium thiosulfate in the side dress nitrogen mix is another solution there. But just think about those sources that are going to be immediately available to the plant. And that gets to the second point. We want them available as quickly as possible to those growing plants, and really get them applied and available to the plant before that critical yield determining stage at around V5, where that plant starts to determine the kernel rows around the cob. So if we're pulling in-season soil tests, pull them, get them back quick, and then identify some of the things we can do to get nutrient out to that crop in the growing year. And then we'll talk a little bit more about this on next month's webinar, but we need to be monitoring to make sure those nutrients that we're applying are actually getting into the plant through the use of a tissue test. And we'll talk some more about that on next month's webinar, but that's all we had today for you, running right at 9:30 here. So unless there's any questions, everyone have a safe and good week. Thank you.
That concludes this Pioneer Growing Point Agronomy video podcast. Visit our page on pioneer.com and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Pioneer for more agronomy insights.